So here we are, our last talk. I see some familiar faces. Thank you for coming out and for staying till the end. I know it's a long night on a weeknight, so thank you for being here. So I want to tell you a little bit about meaningful me time. Up until now, we've talked about kind of what you can do for others. This last talk was about looking at our own bodies, and now it's, okay, but what do I need to do for me? Because I'm a busy person. Who here is a busy person? And you're still here tonight. That's fantastic. Most of us, right? And so how do people say me time? I heard this thing on the radio. It was a commercial that was like, is your me time sitting in traffic? Like, yeah, sometimes. So how do we make it mean something? I wanted to start with telling you a little bit about myself and my story, my journey. In 2016, I gave my first TED Talk, and it was a big deal for me because it was one of those kind of, bucket list things that I hoped one day I'd be able to do, and it happened, 2016, in November. From November to the next TED Talk was in March, I experienced a debilitating episode of depression to the point where I was suicidal. And that continued on for about 18 months. So here's what I looked like, depressed, on the verge of a panic attack, second TED Talk. Doesn't look very depressed, right? Because we learned to put on a face. Right before this picture, my sister took the picture, and she said, smile, and I was anxious. And I hadn't given my talk yet, and I was uncomfortable, and I didn't want to be there. My family it was in Kelowna, my whole family had come out to support me. And I didn't even want to smile, and she said, just show some teeth, let's get a good one. And this is one of the pictures that we got, and it looks like everything's fine, right? Because those of us who live with anxiety and depression, we learn how to mask it, right? We learn how to put on the face. This next picture is me about a week after my father died. Looks like I'm fine, looks like I'm happy. This night was actually a gala, and my mom and dad were gonna go together, but he'd passed away. So my mom asked me to be her date. So we bought this dress, and then we were taking pictures, and we were all in tears because he wasn't there. And she said, smile, and I said, I can't. And she said, do this thing. And so I did, and that's the picture that came out of that. Here's a picture of when I really was happy. This is when I had moved through my depression. I started going to the gym. I started reaching out to friends again. I started getting myself back. And this is what I looked like. And here's some more. This is what I looked like. This is what I looked like. This is in August. My sister got married, the first same-sex wedding in our entire South Asian family. And I was happy. But if someone looking at me from the outside were to look at all these pictures, I don't think they'd get it right. I don't think they'd know which of the pictures I was depressed in and which of the pictures I actually felt good. And so when we talk about meaningful me time, part of it is taking off the mask, at least with your loved ones. Maybe not on Facebook, maybe not on Instagram, though I did it there too. I started posting pictures of myself, in bed, and saying, hey, mental health matters. It affects all of us, and I'm sure in our audience today, either you or someone you know lives with some of these challenges. And so for those of us who do, or those of us who love someone who do, self-care is that much more important. So enough about me, let's talk about you a little bit. Here's my model. I call it the balance wheel. And I learned about this in my transpersonal psychology training. So transpersonal psychology is a meeting point between psychology and spirituality. So looking at, how do those two pieces intersect? And when I was going to school, we actually had to consider these 6 areas in everything we did, in all our papers, in all our projects and assignments. And the idea is if these 6 areas are in balance, we feel good. Our life feels whole, it feels fulfilling. We can actually think about meaning and purpose. And so one of the things I often do with my clients is I have them draw a wheel. And we map it out. How much of the pie do you spend on each of these areas? So when you look at it, think about yourself, right? How's your emotional life? How about your physical? How much attention are you paying to your physical well-being? Your social interactions, right? Social interactions are one of the first things to go when we get busy. We don't prioritize our interactions. Creativity, our spiritual life, and intellectual stimulation. And so think about your own pie, what it might look like. Which of the slices are a little bit smaller than the others? Right? So I would tell my client, draw it out. And they draw it out and they identify what's the skinny slice, and then they have an opportunity to stretch it a little bit, to do one thing. And I'm not here today to give you some formula and say, oh, just do this and you'll feel better and you'll feel not burned out, because for each of us it's going to be a little bit different. But let's think about how. How do you actually make a plan for yourself? When I teach my students, I actually put up on the overhead in our, which class? I think it's so I teach trauma and crisis counseling. And the first part of that course is actually self-care. Because you can't really work with people who have deep trauma if you're not looking after yourself. And I've learned that in the past 4 years. If I don't look after me, I'm of no use to my clients, my kids, my friends, myself. And so I put up my calendar and I talk about self-care and what it looks like. And so that looks like regularly moving my body. Regularly moving my body. Whether it's, I don't have time for the gym, well then what? Guess what? My kids are going to see me running up and down the flights of stairs at home. Just moving the body. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money or time, just moving the body. That's one thing for me. Another thing for me is making sure I meaningfully interact with people. So not just everything's great, but those friends that I have that know me, that can look at me, that can hear my voice on the phone and say, something's wrong, and know that. So I make an effort, a point of reaching out to those people on a regular basis. Diet, making sure I get lots of vegetables. Vegetables are very overrated in this culture. No, I would say underrated, because when you go to, I'm looking at the kids' menu in the shops, in the restaurants, and it's like chicken fingers and fries. And I guess the fries are the vegetable. Right? Like, we just don't really eat enough vegetables, and it's amazing what vegetables do for the brain. I know it sounds like, oh, your mom says eat your broccoli, but it's a real thing. I hate broccoli, but I eat it because I know it's good for my brain, and I know it's good for my overall well-being. So diet, exercise, social relationships, creativity. When's the last time you did something just because you loved it? Not because you were getting paid for it, or you were doing it for somebody else, but just because you really loved it. When was that? Who's done something they really loved in the last week? Oh yeah, all right. So about half of us are already doing that. And so giving ourselves permission to do that more, right? That it doesn't have to be like, I feel guilty because I'm doing this thing. So one of the creative things I do is scrapbooking. Like, I just cut out pictures and I put them all together and it looks pretty, and there's no real reason for that. It's not vision boarding. I'm just putting pictures together because it's fun for me, right? My daughter, she came in at 2 years old. She came in and she said, Mama, I'm an artist. And she walked away. So we have a little area for her to do her art. And there's paint all over the floor, and there's, but it's her space, because creativity is such an important part of growth. And I never had room for that as a kid, because for me it was about go to school and do all that and be successful. And what was it? Be a doctor or a lawyer? I'm kind of a doctor. I have my PhD, so I kind of got under the radar on that one. So that creativity piece. Spiritual. Now, by spiritual, I don't necessarily mean belonging to a faith community, though for some people that's very spiritually fulfilling. For other people, it's that connection that you have when you're outside. And you look around at the trees, and you realize that whoever created all of this, created this. Whoever created all of this, created this. And I remember speaking to a friend of mine when I was in that low place, and I felt so ashamed of where I was. Even though I'm a mental health professional and I know it's a chemical imbalance and all of that, I felt this shame. And she said to me, look, do you believe that everything is created by the Creator, whatever word you want, God, whatever word, Spirit? do you believe that this whole place was created by some force? And I said, yep. And she said, well, does God make mistakes? And I said, no. And then she said, then everything that's happening here is not a mistake. It's part of your process. Now, whether you believe in a higher power or you understand your spirituality to be some different way, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that you're asking yourself those deep, mystical questions. Why am I here? What is this life about? What can I give back before I pass, before I end this physical life? That's what I mean when I talk about spirituality, those deep philosophical questions. And to give ourselves some time. I just started 3 days ago, so don't quote me on this, but 3 days ago I started a morning journaling practice. Tomorrow morning will be my 4th day. And what it requires is that I wake up 20 minutes early. And I love my sleep. Whew, I love my sleep. But for the last 3 days I've been doing it. Now that I've said it in front of all of you, I have to keep going, right? 30 days is my goal. And it's becoming kind of a spiritual practice, because in that process, and I'll talk a little bit about journaling, in that process, I'm accessing a part of my mind that I don't usually access. I'm carving out a bit of time just for me. And yeah, it means I'm up at 5:20. It's freaking early, right? To get my kids to school at 8:30. So for 3 hours, I'm doing shit in the morning. And it's mostly for other people. Right? But those 20 minutes are for me. So that's the model. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about what are the questions? Because I said I'm not going to be prescriptive and say do that. Actually, I will. I'll give you a few suggestions. But for those who kind of like to figure it out on their own, 3 questions you want to ask yourself. First, what do I need? So for people who tend to be high achievers, it's hard to admit to yourself that you actually need something. Other people can need things, and you're happy to give it to them, but you don't need anything. High five. Right? But what if we were to admit to ourselves, I have a need? And then what is that need? What do I need? The second question is, what can I do about it? Right? So looking at that circle, are there any things in that wheel that I can shift or adjust to do something about what I need? And the third question, and one that's often skipped over by high achievers and independent people, is who can help? Who can help? The last talk was about those relationships, right? She said that the wounds happen in, one of my teachers said the wounds happen in relationship, and so the healing has to happen in relationship. Who can help me? My second TED talk was actually about how we're social mammals. We're actually designed to be in community. We are healthier when we're around other people. Loneliness is having the same physiological impacts on people as lifelong smoking. What? People who have had really healthy lives but are lonely in their old age have the same physical outcomes or similar as people who have smoked regularly their entire lives. Because we were never meant to do this alone. A lone monkey is actually a dead monkey, right? For thousands and thousands of years, we've done things together. And so that third question is really critical. Even if there's something I can do about it, I'm still going to ask myself, who can help? Think about when you help people. How does it feel? Feels good. Okay, so if it feels good, give me a thumbs up. If it feels bad, okay, good. So Generally, unless it's a lot of pressure, generally it feels good to help people. Now, when you don't ask for help, you're robbing all of your loved ones from that good feeling. Why don't they get to feel good and help you once in a while? And what I found in my life is when I actually asked for help, when I actually reached out and said, hey guys, I'm not okay, I didn't have to do everything for everyone else anymore. They saw that I had weaknesses, and my family got to come around and hold me up for once, rather than me being the one who held up everybody else. And it shifted things for sure. People were uncomfortable. But it was like a turning point in our family. I remember sitting down, it was Christmas, And, I'd been kind of faking it, and it was, remember, November to March, so that Christmas. Just faking it, everything was fine. The following Christmas, 1 year later, 1 entire year later, it's Christmas again. And our whole family was there, extended family, everybody sitting, and my mom likes to do this thing where we all sit in a circle and then we all say one thing we're grateful for. Or we pick a card, or she's always done this since we were kids. And so we're going around and everyone's saying something they're grateful for. And when it came my turn, I said, I'm actually not going to tell you what I'm grateful for, but I'm going to admit something. For the last year, I've really been struggling. And to the point that I nearly took my life. And it's because of someone in this room today that I didn't, because you picked up the phone and you talked to me. And for a year, my family had no idea, because I didn't know I could ask. And this was only 2 years ago. But recovery happens so quick when you have community around you, when you have people who love you, when you have people who believe that you can get better. So, the title of the talk was like Evidence-Based Strategies for Self-Care. So here's the 4 that I want to just quickly touch on. So journaling should have 2 L's. That was my typo. So busy doing it, I didn't write it properly. So journaling, it's really fascinating. If you're a researcher, the evidence that's out there on journaling is mind-blowing. And not this kind of journaling, text, or this, actually forming the letters with your hand. It does something in the brain and it starts connecting things up. And you can journal gratitude. So some people who have anxiety challenges, I say don't journal about what happened because that can spin you out. But journal about what you're grateful for. What's one thing today that you're grateful for? One thing that happened. One person you met. So journaling. And like I said, I'm experimenting with this, reinstating this daily journaling practice that I used to have when I was a teenager. So let's see how that goes. Next, mindfulness. That should only be 1 L, I think. Mindfulness is a very fancy word. What it basically means is paying attention right now to what's going on here and being here. Just that's all it means. So what I'm going to have you do is put your hands on your lap. And you might want to look at them. And lift up 1 finger at a time. So we're going to lift up our pinkies first. You might want to take a breath with that and put it down. Pick up the next finger. Middle finger, pointer, and your thumb. And just notice how you feel. That was about 3.5 seconds. All we did was we paid attention to one particular thing and we're fully present with it. That's all we did. So you can do that there's mindful eating, there's mindful walking, there's mindful painting, there's lots of different things you can do. But really it's anything you do, paying attention and doing it in a thoughtful, present way. That's mindfulness. Get outside. Get outside. For thousands and thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of years, we have lived outside. It's only in the last few hundred years really that we have artificial lighting and ceilings and roofs and all that. We lived outside. When we walked on the grass, not on concrete. And we don't do that anymore. But our bodies, for thousands of years, were designed for that. So get outside. You know why you feel better when there's birds singing? As long as it's not too early in the morning. When birds are singing, it's because in nature, back when we used to live on the land or with the land, birds singing would mean everything's fine. Because birds would stop singing when there was a predator. Right? And so if birds are singing, it means you're safe, everything's fine. Who here likes to go camping? Yeah, almost all of us. So why do we like camping? Because we're outside. Pretty much. We're outside. It's really that simple. And so my kids and I, we have a little tent that we pitch in the backyard. And we don't have a very big backyard. It's a townhouse. It's a very small backyard. But there's a little tent. Right now, for the last 4 days, we've been sleeping all in one room on the floor together, pretending we're camping, because they don't want to be outside. It's too cold for them. But just get outside. It's so healing if you do it with awareness. And finally, friendship. Nothing is going to fill your tank like somebody who really cares about you. Nothing. And so just earlier we had the idea of, okay, think about someone you love. So right now, just bring to mind a friend. Maybe a friend that you haven't talked to in a while that you might want to reach out to over the next few days. You know you have one, or maybe more than one. I have a colleague that is doing a project called The Science of Friendship, right? There's power in friendships. And we talk a lot about, the parent-child relationship or siblings, families, but friendship, you get to choose your friends. You actually want to hang out with them, right? I'm not saying you don't want to hang out with your family, but for some of us, you get to choose your friends. And so investing there and just reaching out there. So these are just 4 suggestions. You will have more, you will have your own ideas. I hope there's some little, if I answer Alex's question, what's the nugget? I think the nugget is you got to get real before you can get balanced, right? And that was my journey, getting real first and then moving to this place of balance.